Okay, so there's the meta-language that is within subsystems but isn't necessarily friendly to an acronym, so individual concepts usually. So what I want you to do is go back to the tables that you developed for each of the subsystems, and you're just going to add either a second table underneath or a little additional part where these, of course, don't have acronyms. All right, within phonetics and phonology, we've got features of a broad, general, and cultivated accents. For your broad accent, you're basically thinking about your out bush sort of cobber out there with your, you're going a bit bush bashing, picking up some wallabies with your rifle in the back of your ute. So you're hearing the vowel lengthening and you're hearing a fair bit of elision. So we're taking out a fair bit of the word, the G's and the suffixes of words. We sort of drop those off because we're going to go to the spot over there. And a fair bit of assimilation, so your words sort of seem to run together, and you can see there's not really any real clear breaks necessarily, but I'm not also at the same time not really talking in a big rush. This is my broad accent. Your general Australian accent is basically the one that most of us use. You can think of general features of the Australian accent such as the high rising terminal and the non-rhoticity, which is basically when you think of car, bar, you're not saying car, bar, you're saying car, bar, and you're sort of dropping off the R at the end of most of your words. Cultivated is your relatively posh British accent where you enunciate everything quite precisely. The cultivated Australian accent is very much uncommon, but in Australian history it was rather common and rather important that we learn about it as well. And also you will need an understanding of the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is pictured in the top right-hand slide of this slide. All right, morphology and lexicology. So we've got function words and content words. So content words is about 90, maybe 95% of the language, and function words are the things that tie it together. So they don't have necessarily an adding to the content function, but they serve important roles in the same way that a conjunction or a comma sort of helps to make the language understandable. Affixation, prefix is at the start, suffix at the end, infix is in between the words, so something that's abso-bloody-lutely fantastic. Sort of you can see there's an additional morpheme added in there. Inflectional and derivational. Inflectional changes the number, the quality, the type, cat, cats. Derivational changes the word, so mad, maddening, different concepts. Then we've got root, bound, and free morphemes. The root is basically one free morpheme that stands by itself, and a bound morpheme is something that can go on the end, such as an ly or an ing. By itself doesn't mean anything, but it can be added to a morpheme to make a new morpheme. Suffixation in Australian English, you're thinking of smoko, tinny, robbie, pollies, tradies, brickies, sparkies, just our tendency to add suffixes to the end of words that don't necessarily need to be there, and this sort of diminutives is a part of this idea. Morphological patterning, conversion of word class, creative word formation is basically the way, if you go back to morphology, all of those concepts are the way that morphology is patterned. And then lexical choice and patterning is just basically the way the words that you pick within a text, how they all work to create coherence and cohesion, make them stick together and make the text understandable because it's sort of in a narrow realm and it's consistent with itself and it's on topic that you would expect it to be on. All right, discourse, pretty straightforward. Code switching, switching between dialects or languages. So you might think of your idiolect, your sociolect, and your ethnolect. So for example, if you go home to your third generation Vietnamese household, you'll be more influenced by your ethnolect. So you might be speaking with more of an accent or using different syntactic patterns, those sort of things. Then if you go to hang out with your mates, your teenage cool youth speak fancy friends, you'll be using your sociolect, which is a different code, and then your idiolect is the sort of thing that stays true to you. So switching between those, standard English and non-standard English, is code switching to Aboriginal English and many other forms of English. They're also transitioning from one to the other is your code switching. You also need to know about the conventions of transcription for spoken English, and if you've done a number of spoken discourse texts, then you'll get a pretty good idea of what these are. Lento, allegro, all these patterns. And even if you create a transcript for a text that you think is really interesting, for maybe for section C, an example that you're going to use, it might be worth turning that into a transcript just so you can think about the prosodic features that kind of go to contributing to the meaning of that text. Syntax, all of those have been acronymized, so you're free, and semantics likewise. So all of those have been covered through a long list and ugly acronyms.